Looks like I'm on TV, so I'm going to call this to order. Welcome to City Council's informational meeting. This is Tuesday, April 9th. I don't have a script, I'm sorry. It's one of those days, folks. It's an ice storm and nobody can think straight. It is welcome to Carnegie Town Hall, those folks who have been required to be here. I'm grateful for your service today, and those of you that are watching live on CityLink and on SiouxFalls.org, we're glad that you're here, those of you that do have power. Just a couple of notes before we start. There was just a half an hour ago was a press briefing at the Emergency Operation Center, and so there will be, I'd encourage you to watch local news in terms of any updates on the storm. I'd also remind you that the tree branch drop-off sites are both open, one at the street department on Chambers Street and one at the fairgrounds on West 12th Street. And the other thing I would caution you about is sidewalks. We have had one staff member go down on a sidewalk today, and so we give a shout out to Tony Simon. Thanks for being here and helping us out. You're in our thoughts and prayers as you heal. All that being said, let's move ahead with audit committee reports. Councilor Jameson, do you want to start with that?
Yes, thank you. The audit committee met last Thursday at 4 o'clock here at Carnegie Hall. We had several audit reports, and Rich Oaksel is here, and I've asked Rich to maybe speak to us for just a minute. There were no significant findings other than probably some good news. So, Rich, you could update us.
Yeah, good afternoon, Council. Rich Oaksel, Internal Audit Manager. We had 3 short reports that were approved. They'll be presented a week from today at the Informational. And then partners from Eide Bailey, our external auditor, gave their report to the audit committee. The city had a unqualified opinion, which means we had a clean audit opinion on our annual financial audit, and with no audit findings from our external auditor, which is very good news. And I understand the comprehensive annual financial reports, the CAFRs, will be published very soon and will be available to the council and the public. So,
great, thank you. Questions for Rich? Councilor Rolfing.
I have a comment on that, and that is that one of the chief auditors from Eide Bailey, I know, and pulled me off to the side, and he said that having no comments, or how did you put that, Rich?
unqualified opinion.
Unqualified opinion,
Okay.
which is no findings in a city this size, and for having it done that quickly was just unheard of. So it's really, really quite a compliment to our people around here that there was no findings whatsoever that they had. So congratulations to everyone involved. Thank you.
Very cool. Good to know. Thank you. Moving on, fiscal committee report from the meeting held Tuesday, April 2nd. Councilor Karski.
Yes, we had a fiscal committee meeting last week, which would have been our first meeting since February. We only had one agenda item, and that dealt with the pension plan. As most of you, or all of you probably remember, last summer we made significant changes on a city level to how future employees, future being those hired after July 1st, how they will be handled in a pension plan, moving them over to the South Dakota retirement system. The state legislature did their job, the government signed their bill, and it became law. Now it required a little bit of cleanup on our city level of our ordinance to address those dates, and that is going to be done. We will have a first reading on April 16th and a second reading on May 7th for that ordinance.
Great. Questions for Councilor Karski or members of the committee? All right, thank you. Moving on to City Council open discussion. Any items this afternoon? Okay, I'll keep us moving then. Let's go into presentations. The Aquatic Facility Master Plan update by Don Kearney, Director of Parks and Recreation. Thanks for coming.
You bet. Good afternoon, City Council members. Don Kearney with Parks and Rec. I just wanted to real briefly bring the council up to date on the next steps in the aquatic facility master planning process. We're not here to really present the master plan, but just kind of talk you through where we've been and where we're headed to bring the master planning process to fruition. As you know, back in January, we had stakeholder meetings and public meetings to gauge the needs of the community and have our consultant assess the condition of our existing aquatic facilities. In February, we had Kevin Post with Councilman Hunsaker, our consultant on this project, to present us with the demographic information, along with the aquatics toolbox that really provided the different options for both indoor and outdoor facilities that we could use to serve the needs of our city over the next 10 years. We did, a couple weeks ago, have a meeting that was very well attended where Kevin presented his aquatic facility master plan recommendations. And then that meeting was very well attended, as I mentioned, and it really was almost a full house at the main library. And following his presentation and recommendations, there was a good question and answer session following that. And at the end, we asked folks to fill out their comment cards to provide us their feedback on the presentation. I provided those comments to you on your desk today. We've rolled those up and provided those to Kevin as well for him to consider as he continues to refine his recommendations. Out of the, well, almost nearly 100 people in attendance, 40 provided feedback to us. A majority of those comments were positive about the aquatic facility master plan recommendations, and but there still obviously remains some opposition to the Spellerberg Park location. Next steps include the Park Board's review and consideration of the plan on April 16th, and then Kevin Post with Councilman Hunsaker will be back before you on May 14th to present his master plan recommendations after he's presented that information to the Park Board. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any question about process or next steps.
Great. Questions from council? Councilor Jameson?
Don, in regard to the process, when we first started talking about the whole aquatics master plan, we talked a lot about, or at least I did, of getting some regional consideration about what happens in Fargo, what happens in Des Moines, what happens in other cities that are climate challenged like we are, challenged in the weather that we have, in the cold weather and the snow. How do they do it? What did they do? What did they do wrong? And how can we capitalize on their mistakes and do something that's even better? Mm-hmm. And I hadn't seen that at either phase, at any of the presentations I've seen. He says that's going to be a part of the program, part of the study, and I was at the library at that presentation, and he kept referring to the national trends, and never once referred to the northern climate. So again, I'm asking you to please, that's one of the key pieces of information that I was looking for from the beginning on this whole aquatics master plan, to help us figure it out. So again, I'm asking for that information.
You bet, and that will be included. One of the things to clarify, the presentation that he provided was more of an executive summary of the actual report that he'll produce, but there will be a lot more detailed information in the final report, which will include those regional comparisons and considerations. So I remember that comment, Councilor Jameson, and that will be included in the report.
Thank you.
You bet.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from council? Super, thanks for keeping us posted. We'll look forward to the final report in May.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I'm going to take a point of privilege as the chair. I did ask the mayor if he could send someone to give us a storm update, and as you heard me at 4 o'clock, I kind of winged it on what I thought was going on, but the mayor has come, and please step forward, sir, and give us a little update on the exciting afternoon that we've had.
Councilor Buck, thank you very much. And I've also invited Chief Sedaris. He's on his way from the Emergency Operations Center as well. He'll be here in just a couple of minutes. First of all, I wanted to give you an update. We do have the Emergency Operations Center up and running. And if you've never had a chance to see that in action, I'd encourage you to do so. Right now there's about 50 to 60 men and women that serve not only the city but also the county over there at the Law Enforcement Center trying to coordinate our efforts, and they're doing a good job. It was one of the first things that we did this morning when we woke up is we said, you know what, let's do this, and they implemented it right away. One of the things that we'll talk about is it's a good time to be neighborly. One of the challenges that we have with this particular storm is that not only do we have the rain and the ice and the coming snow and the wind, well, of course, we've got these down limbs, these trees, as well as power lines. One of the things that we could certainly use your help with, and we're encouraging the people of Sioux Falls to do this, is to begin to remove those limbs, if they can do it safely, out of the roadway, because there is snow that is coming. And of course, we can't remove the snow as efficiently as we can without those tree limbs. So if you can remove those tree limbs safely, please go ahead and do so. We are formulating a plan right now to remove the debris citywide. There is what's called a storm damage response plan that we do have here in the city of Sioux Falls. We're evaluating that now. We're certainly waiting for this storm to progress, and this is going to be a slow-moving storm, but we are evaluating that now. We feel very strongly that if you are out there looking at the city, there is damage everywhere in terms of these tree limbs, and this is going to have to be a concerted citywide effort in order to take care of it, and we will bring that plan not only to the council but also to the people of Sioux Falls. On kind of a side note, there's a really good chance that Project Nice and Project Keep will actually be canceled this year. That is planned for next Monday to start. Of course, Project Nice and Project Keep, it's an unbelievably popular program, but I think that now things are just changing so rapidly. If you just go to the central part of Sioux Falls and you look at all the limbs that are down and the damage that has been caused, I think we're going to have a Project Nice and Project Keep for our entire city, not just a few select neighborhoods in this area. Snow gates. Snow gates will not be tested during this particular snowfall. I think it just makes good common sense, and you can understand why we need folks, these drivers, focusing not only on the snow and the ice, but of course now they're focusing on things like down power lines and limbs that could be potentially in front of them. Some of the things that we would recommend to citizens, we're encouraging people to use what's called a shelter in place in the event of a power loss. This is a storm that Todd Heickamp just reported is going to last well until maybe Thursday. And so if you do have at least enough essentials to get you through Thursday, as Chief Sedaris said, if you've got some cereal that can get you through Thursday, that would be a good example of that. Folks, there are going to be more power outages. There are. Xcel Energy in the city of Sioux Falls, they are in charge of the power in this city. We have had some outages, and I would only expect more. When you leave your city council informational meeting today and you go outside, it's starting all over again in terms of it's a wet ice accumulation, and it's going on the power lines on the trees and things like that. So there are going to be more power outages, and so you can expect that. Down power lines, and Chief Sedaris and others can explain this much better than I, but that is one thing you don't want to get anywhere near of. For example, if a power line falls on a fence, that entire fence is got a really good chance that it's going to cause you some damage. So whether it falls on your home, whether it falls on a tree, whether it falls on your car, stay as far away from it, and please call that in. We are encouraging travel only if necessary within the city. Right now, Dr. Pam Holman has not made an announcement yet on what she plans to do in terms of the schools. But again, I think that they're just waiting to see what happens with the snow and the ice and the wind, and they will certainly make a decision before tomorrow morning. One of the things that we're finding, and it's kind of a surprise to us, is that you can see the ice on the trees, and you can see how much they are being tested right now, and there are still a ton of cars that are parked directly underneath these trees. If you have anything of value, such as a car, we would strongly encourage you to not have them parked underneath, especially mature trees. and there's a ton of them out there, but you just cannot imagine how many cars right now are parked underneath these trees. One of the things that we're very, very aggressive South Dakotans, and we like to get work done. One of the things that you may want to consider is actually allowing Mother Nature to run its course before you go up and try to trim those trees and things like that. I know that there's some people who want to be aggressive, but you may want to allow the thawing to naturally occur before you go up there and try to trim your trees. We do have the 2 locations where you can drop off your tree limbs now if you want. It is free of charge. But if you don't have the ability to do that, just take those tree limbs and put them in between your sidewalk and the curb. And the more orderly you can do that, the better. But the odds are incredibly good that the City of Sioux Falls will be picking those up for all of you. And again, we'll evaluate that soon. I don't know if the chief is here yet. He's not. But if there are any other questions, the county is also highly engaged in this effort. And again, the latest that we just heard from Ty at High Camp about 15 minutes ago is that what we've seen today in terms of weather, there's almost going to be, it's going to almost repeat itself tomorrow with some rain, some ice, and then they're looking at a really, really high potential of anywhere from 7 to 10 inches of snow just for our area. But as I said, this is changing as we're speaking. So again, please be safe, Sioux Falls. Please be patient. Stay tuned. There's more to come. And probably the last advice, hunker down, because this particular storm is going to be a long one. And we'll continue to communicate as much as we possibly can, not only with the council, with the people.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Moran. I appreciate you taking time out to come visit with us. Does council have any pertinent questions now? Councilor Staggers.
Yeah, I was asked if we are going to continue with a city council meeting tonight, because the concern is by the time we get done with the meeting tonight, this could even be worse.
Councilor Staggers, that was a call by leadership this afternoon. Okay. We did decide that we are going to meet. There are enough items on the agenda tonight that the business of the city needs to go forward, and so we are going to meet for...
also, we got to consider safety, too, because it's going to be very...
I understand that, and my message to council members in email today was, if you're uncomfortable making that trip, please let us know. And I would say that to citizens as well. If there's something that you feel like you need to testify at, if you would contact the clerks, we can certainly defer those until later, but there's some items, some contracts that we really do need to deal with this evening. Thank you. Then any other questions for the mayor regarding his report? I think what I will do, Mr. Mayor, is when the chief gets here, I will again just pause the meeting and ask him to come forward so that we don't waste his time.
Appreciate it. I'll see you tonight at 7.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. Yes.
You know what 4 schools are out?
The 4 schools that were out of power were...
What 4 schools were out of power?
Call.
That's
Patrick and Lincoln were.
And Mark Twain. I heard Jefferson and a couple others.
Just interested.
All right. There are folks out there listening to us right now that know way more about it than we do, so I'd check your local news. All right, moving on. Downtown Sioux Falls 2012 Annual Report and 2013 Action Plan. Jason Dennison, come on down. Welcome.
Thanks, Council Chair, members of Council. Jason Dennison, Downtown Sioux Falls. Do you mind running the slide for me? Here this evening to present an executive summary of our 2012 Annual Report. Downtown Sioux Falls, also known as DTSF, is the nonprofit organization dedicated to enhancing the vitality of the downtown district. We accomplish our mission by working in 5 key areas, which are advocacy and partnerships, placemaking programs, economic development, events and promotions, and marketing and communications. I will highlight the progress we made last year in these key areas, starting with advocacy and partnerships. Much of our work is accomplished through effective partnerships that range from the Parking Advisory Board to the Great Plains Zoo. Last year alone, we partnered with over 25 entities and organizations to leverage our resources and advance the downtown district. This year, we are expanding our partnership with the Sioux Falls Police Department to ensure downtown remains a safe place. The Sioux Falls Police Department will provide shoplifting prevention strategies to business owners and will also create a community safety training program for our downtown ambassadors. Next slide. In placemaking programs, we focus our resources on creating a remarkable experience by focusing attention on the quality of public spaces. Our Clean and Green team and Downtown Ambassador program ensure that residents and visitors to downtown are welcomed by a vibrant, clean, safe, and friendly environment. Last year alone, we removed over 7,000 pounds of trash, litter, and debris from the sidewalks of downtown, which is about an 800-pound increase from the year before. As downtown continues to develop, we continue to notice an increase in the demand for these services and are doing our due diligence to meet these demands. Next slide. Marketing and communications. Our efforts continue to increase the awareness of downtown and promote the breadth, diversity, and quality of downtown businesses. Last year, we hosted a total of 74 committee meetings and provided 9 community outreach presentations. That's an average of about 6 committee meetings per month, which are important because they allow downtown stakeholders to provide input on the challenges facing their neighborhood. Enhanced marketing efforts, community outreach, and consistent communications within and outside of downtown continue to be significant initiatives for our organization. Next slide. Economic development. Last year, we expanded our efforts to include packaging and promoting local, regional, and national business assistant programs for entrepreneurs and small business owners. We also launched a series of business education seminars and created a business recruitment kit designed to position downtown as a superior business location and assist commercial brokers in the recruitment of new businesses to downtown. Last year, 23 new businesses opened, 4 existing businesses expanded, and over $100 million in development or redevelopment projects were announced. These figures represent our incredible revitalization success story and the superior business climate found in our city's core. Next slide. Each year, a great deal of our resources are spent planning and hosting community events that increase the awareness of the downtown district and provide a sense of place for our community, as well as entertain and educate residents and visitors. In 2012, we were recognized with an International Downtown Association Merit Award for our Destination Downtown Riverfront program. I'd like to share a direct quote from the IDA press release. Quote, DTSF received the IDA Merit Award for delivering excellence in downtown management. Each year, the IDA Awards recognize organizations that utilize best practices in our industry. The Destination Downtown Riverfront program is a shining example of excellence downtown management that delivers real results, end quote. We are proud of this award and share it with all those who have worked to reclaim the riverfront as a valued community asset. Next slide. Looking ahead, we will plan to devote our resources to an array of programs to advance downtown, but one I would like to highlight is our effort to maintain and foster growth in the downtown by creating a good neighbor policy, noted in our 2013 action plan. Next slide. Working beside downtown stakeholders, we plan to establish a good neighbor policy that conveys the vibrant downtown atmosphere for new residents and new business owners and outline strategies we can undertake to address the issues that arise from living and working in a dynamic mixed-use neighborhood. Finally, we recognize and appreciate the long-standing commitment and support from the City of Sioux Falls in revitalizing the core of our city. I appreciate your time, continued support, and be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Questions from council? Councilor Staggers.
Yes, Jason, I'm sorry, I can't remember, but how much subsidy does the city give, and also how much money do you get from the bid tax?
Certainly. So the bid supports us about $145,000, which is roughly 22% of our annual budget. City contract for services is about $135,000 per year.
Thank you.
About 20% of our budget.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for Jason? All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate your report. I'm going to take a point as chair and pause the meeting again. Chief Sedaris, could I invite you to the front to give your report? The mayor was here briefly, and he said you were coming behind him, and so we're just going to come on down. Thank you so much for your service today. I know it's been a crazy day for you.
Yeah, it has been a little crazy. Jim Sedaris, Fire Chief. Just to give you an update on the storm. It's now raining out, by the way. What we currently think is going to happen is that the weather is going to get worse. We've heard both ways. It's going to keep raining or turn to snow. Probably get another quarter of an inch of rain and heavy winds. The winds are really picking up right now, possibly up to 45-mile-an-hour gusts, which are probably going to take down some power lines. We activated the EOC, our Emergency Operations Center, at 9 o'clock. And what that does is it brings in the key players for the city, from police, fire, Public Works, and the county, and then we worked together as a team. We did develop some incident objectives, and those 4 incident objectives are to clear the roadway of debris, because that's going to be an ongoing problem, especially for response for emergency vehicles, and also as the snow starts to fall. We're talking anywhere from 6 to 10 inches of snow, which will be very heavy. If we don't clear the roadway, what's going to happen is we won't be able to clear the snow easily. Coordinate with utility providers to maintain electrical power. We're having power going on and off throughout the city. Hopefully we'll keep that going. All the schools are back up with power. 4 we're having a problem, but I think those are back up too. Then we're going to prepare for the freezing rains that we're now getting, and then coordinate with open messages to the public of what's going on, what they should do. Right now we're advocating to call it shelter in place. Plan to stay in your home for up to through Thursday, simply because things could be bad enough that you will not be able to move around very easily through Sioux Falls. And those are what we're doing right now. The Emergency Operations Center will be up for 24 hours. We have people down there right now to monitor the system and determine if there's anything we need to do to modify those incident objectives and look at where we're at for tomorrow.
Great.
So that's where we're at right now. If I can answer any questions. But otherwise, things are...
Thank you, Chief. Questions from Council. Councilor Karski.
Just appreciate what you're doing, Chief. I know you've had a busy day, and the next 48 hours are going to be probably even more stressful.
Probably.
Just kind of a reminder, and I know your job is difficult as it is, and having to fight a fire in weather like this is even worse. And people are prone to use temporary or portable heating devices, and if you would just give them a reminder about...
Good point. We're encouraging people not to try and use NIPCO heaters or any type of heating system not approved for indoor use. The problem that will happen is we could easily have carbon monoxide build up in the home. Same thing with running cars or even chainsaws in garages can cause buildup of carbon monoxide, which could cause problems for people for their, actually it's a life and death situation. What we are also advocating is that if people do have power lines down, if there are power lines down, to call 911, keep kids and adults away from those power lines because we don't know if they're energized or not. And if they're on any type of metal structure, it will energize that entire metal structure, so someone could be electrocuted at that point. We did have one significant structure fire today about, I think it was 11 o'clock, but we've gone on, fire's gone on about 120 calls so far today, police around 300 calls today. We've called in overtime crews. The city is actually protected, but we do have plans in place so that if things progress, we would work with both of our departments to bring in and change our staffing routines just for weather responses.
Great. Other questions from Council?
Good, great.
All right. Yeah. Councilor Rolfing said keep up the good work. I would say from Council, our best wishes to all of your staff, and thank you for your service.
But it's a coordinated effort. It's not just fire. It's also police, public works, the county, mayor's office. So it's a real team effort.
We know it is, and we appreciate the work.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for stopping by for us. All right, let's move on. Our next presentation is Live Well Sioux Falls Project Update from Alicia Kalura. Welcome, Alicia.
Sorry for being a little disorganized. We were chipping away a little longer than we expected this afternoon. I am Alicia Kalura, Assistant Director of Public Health, and I'm here to provide an update for Live Well Sioux Falls. You'll remember that Live Well Sioux Falls started in about 2011 with the Community Transformation Grant, and then we spent 2012 working with our community partners doing an assessment and expanded the scope of that work. Up on the screen and in your presentation today is just a little bit of a spot reminder of the things that we looked at when we did our community assessment. We looked at the areas such as the community at large, which is the City of Sioux Falls essentially, work sites, schools, healthcare, and community institutions. And then each one of those sectors that makes up our community, we looked at policy and environment in the areas of physical activity, nutrition, tobacco use, chronic disease management, and leadership. So what does that really mean for the municipality as to what we would look at? With physical activity, we would take a look at things like how connected is our community? Is it very walkable? Is it very bikeable? Is it easily accessible through public transportation? For nutrition, how do we promote healthy choices in our public venues? Different portion sizes, access to affordable fresh foods. For tobacco, we would look at indoor and outdoor tobacco use policies, as well as how does the community support people who would like cessation services. Chronic disease management, that's really about how we educate the community on making healthy choices. And then leadership, how are we as leaders budgeting and putting health in our decision making at the municipal level. So I just pulled out a couple of examples of things that we're working on now in each one of those 5 health factors. We probably have 5 or 6 things happening in each health factor, but I just pulled out a couple for the sake of time. We have small projects and a little bit projects on a larger scale. One thing that we're doing in physical activity is we are certainly promoting any opportunity we can to get people physically active, such as the National Walking Day, when we helped coordinate a walk for City of Sioux Falls employees that the mayor led. We also have partnered with our Parks and Recreation Department to deliver several classes in the area of physical activity, so things such as basketball clinics, how to exercise without equipment. And then through our Wellmark grant, we have our Commute Active program. The overall intent of that program is to increase the number of walking or bicycling commutes in our community. And we have initiated that project. What we're going to do is we're able to get the Cathedral District to sign on as the pilot neighborhood. And what we'll do is we'll train them on how to perform a walk audit. When you do a walk audit, you do things such as identify sidewalk safety, complete sidewalks, route crossings, curb ramps, general lighting and safety, and then they can communicate those issues back to city staff, and together by partnering with the neighborhood, we can make the overall neighborhood more walkable. And the intent would be that if this is successful, that the Cathedral District could model this for other core neighborhoods. In the area of nutrition, again, through our partnership with Parks and Recreation Department, we've done several classes. One of them is called the Harvest of the Month. It was a month, every month we go in to kids K through 5 and teach them about a healthy fruit or vegetable and provide samples, and they're able to take that information back home with them. But then also on a larger scale, we know our event center is going to be opening up soon, and we expect over 500,000 visitors a year. And that is certainly a lot of health choices that we could potentially influence. So we have been working with our city team to evaluate what does make a healthy place. There are certain things that we are normally looking for, such as LEED certifications, general safety standards. But another opportunity is to see how we can use that place to encourage healthy behaviors. So again, can you walk easily to the event center? Can you bike easily to it? Is it available to people who use public transportation? In the area of nutrition, we would look at having healthy choices available. We know that the city, or we know that individuals are demanding healthy choices, whether they're in public venues or restaurants. And so how are we looking at alternative portion sizes, or making sure simple things like, does the water cost as much or the same price as the pop? Things that you might not normally think about, but by disproportionately using pricing strategies, you might encourage people to make an unhealthy choice. So I'm pleased to report that we had our first meeting with Ovations recently, and to talk to them and sort of provide them a menu of options, so to speak, on providing the community with healthy choices, and they were very positive, and we're going to continue those meetings and try to firm up that partnership long term. Tobacco-free, we've had quite a few activities going on. You've most recently heard about tobacco-free youth recreation. We did advocate and assist with the implementation of this policy. It evolved through 2 affirmative board resolutions, one through the Board of Health, another through the Parks and Recreation Board. And through those affirmative resolutions, and in partnership with the department, they did adopt a policy for tobacco-free youth recreation. This policy discourages the use of tobacco products in just a couple of venues. One would be playgrounds, and the other would be where youth are the primary users of the system, so during league games. So think of youth soccer, youth baseball. Areas that are not included in this policy would be the general parks, grounds, special events, adult sport leagues, things like that. There are many benefits to a tobacco-free outdoor policy. Some of them may include litter control. It may also include protecting youth from secondhand smoke or other patrons, and those are good ends. We are really looking at youth prevention. We know that if children do not start smoking by the time or using tobacco by the time they're 19, it's very unlikely that we will. If we can stave that off, that they will. If we can stave that off even to the age of 26, it's almost zero that that person would pick up tobacco use. We also know that with all the gains that we've made in the last several decades, tobacco use is still the #1 cause of preventable death. And so that's why you'll see this as an important public health issue. So our platform is really more youth protection and youth prevention, and we were really pleased that the Parks Department was willing to partner with us on this Live Well strategy. We do see communities across the nation taking even further measures. This is a tobacco-free youth recreation, and despite how you've seen some of the published reports, this is not a park smoking ban, although I will say over 800 cities in the nation have adopted that strategy. We're really looking at playgrounds and where youth leagues and such happen. The enforcement of this policy is mainly through signage. One thing that they've noticed through tobacco policies across the country is by far and away, people are very respectful of community guidelines, and if they see a sign, they're respectful of it. Another way of enforcement is just through the users of the grounds themselves, whether it's self-enforcement or a mom or dad saying, hey, if you don't mind, do you see the sign? Do you mind taking it back a little bit? The youth associations have been very supportive. Many of them have in their own policies and code of conduct a restriction on tobacco use, and so they're excited that they have this to go along with the things that they're supporting with their youth leagues and the people that are watching their games. And as far as law enforcement has been a great partner. They will be enforcing through education. Our police, our parks police have been given kippy packs, and they are personal extinguishing devices per se that also have the number of the quit line on them. Aside from what we do know about tobacco users is that many of them want to quit. So as much as this is about youth prevention, our enforcement is really education and offering people a means to quit or just take it a little bit farther from where they are. I just want to, this is not in the public presentation, I apologize, I just added this today, but this is an example of an area where we already have smoke-free places in our parks. Currently our pools are smoke-free, and you'll notice at the bottom of the sign that that has been posted, and it's also very well respected. I don't think that there is a need for a lot of enforcement around that either. Again, people are very respectful of the guidelines. Finally, outside of tobacco-free youth recreation, one activity that our team is also doing is with a couple of community partners. In June 27th, I believe, we'll be hosting a tobacco-free multi-housing seminar, and that is really to partner with people in multi-unit housing that want to learn more about the science of it, the legalities of it, and how they can have a toolkit to make their own multi-unit housing complex or home smoke-free or tobacco-free. Chronic disease management. April is our big squeeze, 2013. That was a mistake on my slide. Last year we screened over 5,000 people for high blood pressure as well as provided education. Our goal this year is 7,000, and we are poised to far exceed that because we have been able to get most of the top 20 employers in town on board with the big squeeze. We have over 70 sites that we're going to be performing these activities along with our other community partners. And then also, you may or may not be aware that nonprofit hospitals are now required to do community assessments as part of their community benefit work. And so we are going to be re-teaming up in the next few weeks with the Healthcare Coalition and looking at our assessment in line with other assessments that were done in 2012. And it could be a really good opportunity for us to even enhance our community level efforts that really maximizes everyone's resources and has a large impact. And then my last slide, in the leadership area, we have recruited for and begun meeting with a director-level steering committee. This steering committee will provide governance for the Live Well Sioux Falls initiatives that are related to community at large. But it will also help us as a department build in some more layers into our everyday work about how we do include health in all decisions, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, as well as how do we want to try to make these efforts sustainable. There's a couple of events that I want you to also note. One is a Healthy Community Summit, and that's in June. When we worked with our city team, they asked us to please do a better job educating our business community, our developers, and our lenders on what healthy community design is. And so we intend to do that in June, and we will invite and highly encourage city council members to attend that summit with us so that we can all come together and talk about how, looking into the future, we want to continue to build on the good efforts that all of our city staff do in building a healthy community. And then finally, a well-being summit. We knew through our assessment that worksite has the greatest opportunity to do the greatest good when really influencing healthy behaviors. So we are going to have a wellness summit specifically targeting local CEOs and business leaders because we want them to understand what the great opportunity they have to influence the health of our community as well as the return on investment. So that is the end of my project update. As always, I have a great team, Jennifer Johnson, Rana DeBoer, and Mary Michaels, as well as the city team and the Live Well Sioux Falls Coalition that all do a great job to support this initiative. And with that, I'll wrap up and take questions.
Thank you, Alicia. We appreciate the report. Questions from council? Councilor Staggers.
Yes, in regard to the tobacco-free zones in the parks, basically I'm in favor of that. But I'm not in favor of how it was brought about.
Okay.
The reason I say that is because a number of years ago, the City Council voted to ban smoking in public buildings, and I think it was a good thing to do. And so we are also responsible ultimately for the park. So I guess my concern, of course, is that the City Council should be doing this banning, not the Parks Department, not the Health Department. If you want to do it, come to us and present an ordinance, and we'll most likely pass it. So I'm wondering why that wasn't done.
Why wasn't it done? Well, how I would answer that is this is not a citywide park smoking ban. So when we sat down as a city team to think about the scope of this particular initiative, we defined it in a very finite area, playgrounds, and where youth recreate. And so at the time, we made the decision not to move forward with a citywide smoking ordinance. We thought that we could stay true with our youth prevention efforts by going with this route. We did gain the support of the Health Board and the Parks Board, and through their affirmative resolutions, the Parks Department had the support to pass this policy, and there is reference in the city ordinance to the authority of the Parks Board and the Parks Director. So this is not a smoking ban in the parks.
It really is. You're just not enforcing it.
Well, we're not using...
Look at your sign. It's a ban.
Well, we're not using the citation process.
To enforce, yes.
Alicia, can I ask Don Kearney to come forward and talk about how we do this sort of thing in the parks that speak to the alcohol ban in some of the parks? And can you talk about the role of the park board in city government?
Yeah, and maybe just for a little background for the benefit of those that, obviously, Michelle, you run the park board. There is a process that we go through every year to adopt policies and guidelines to basically manage the park system. Everything from the hours of the use of Tut Hill House for weddings, Japanese gardens, whatever it might be. And one of the things that came up a while back, a similar scenario, where we were having softball tournaments during youth events, and we had individuals that were bringing alcohol into those events during the youth events. And one of the questions we had for the city attorney's office at the time was, can we sign the areas that we have concerns about, like Sherman Park, for example, to restrict alcohol during youth events? And there was a section, 95-032 of city ordinance that allows the parks director to prohibit conduct in areas of parks that is dangerous or interferes with another's use of the parks. And that was a provision in city ordinance that allowed us to place those signs because we had concerns from event organizers that people were drinking in front of kids, and we didn't think that was a good idea. And at the city attorney's office direction, they said, you can do that, but you must sign it. And so this is a very similar situation, and we use that same ordinance to prohibit the use of tobacco during youth events and playgrounds.
Okay, thank you, Don.
My concern is that we have unelected Parks Board members, Health Board members making these decisions. And once again, I think it ultimately should be the responsibility of the City Council. So I think it would be better if you would bring it before the City Council.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Staggers. Thank you, Don. Councilor Aguilar.
You know, I think that as a council, over the past 3 years, we've looked at this issue, and again, I don't look at this as a ban because there's no teeth to it, really. There's no ticket being written or whatever. But I think it's something that we as a council should be looking at, and I would suggest that it go to one of our committees and look at an actual ban to smoking in the parks.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Aguilar. A couple of committee ideas come to mind. Hang on, Councilor Staggers. Public Services Committee or Land Use Committee? I'm seeing nods. Land Use Committee, would that be all right, Councilor Rolfing? Okay. Councilor Staggers.
Yes, also, this idea of different portion sizes. Now,
okay, hang on. Are we done with the tobacco thing then? Did we take care of that for you, Councilor Staggers, if it goes
yes.
to committee? Okay. All right, great. Thank you. All right.
Now, when you talked about different portion sizes, it sounded like you were talking mostly about the event center. Am I right or wrong on that? Or are we talking about the convention center? Are we talking about the Falls Cafe? Or what are we talking about?
Well, today I was specifically talking about the conversations that we've had with Ovations regarding the event center. We sort of took that as a starting place. When our city team did our assessment, everyone sort of looked around and said, can we make the event center a healthy place? Well, we've done some research, and a lot of the things that they are doing with the event center, such as LEED certifications and the work that's being done along Russell Street to promote more bike access, those are healthy things that fall right in line with what Live Well would promote. We don't have anything in our contracts with our vendor to say that they would certainly do anything with the health of their foods, but we know that Ovations has a platform of everything fresh, that they work towards providing fresh foods for people, and so the work that we want to do with Ovations is more along the lines of a community partnership.
Okay, you also mentioned pricing too. You mentioned something about bottled water and things like that. So I guess I'm wondering about with pop and hot dogs, are we going to encourage Ovations to charge more to discourage people from having hot dogs and pop?
Director Franken, would you like to speak to that? Thank you.
Jill Franken, Health Director. I think to answer the question is just to look from a larger perspective that whatever we are bringing forward through Live Well Sioux Falls, Councilor Stagers, is based on, Alicia and the team has done a lot of work to really research where is the evidence supporting any of the strategies and recommendations that we bring forward to this community. And things that have been tried and found to be successful in other communities, and that the CDC, the National Health Strategies, and organizations that are looking at best practices are recommending. So we are either doing a combination of activities, health promotion, educating the community, helping to make recommendations on how to provide nutrition to the best ability, but not certainly regulating that activity at this time, but really bringing forward. There is no regulation being proposed around nutrition, but rather education in our community. Correct? Yeah.
I guess I'm concerned that when we start down this road, we start including a lot of other things. Will we ban hot dogs at the baseball stadium? Because, hot dogs really are not the most healthiest food around.
An organization may decide that for themselves. We're one of the communities with the worst consumption of fruits and vegetables in the nation. So I would dare say that we have a lot of work to do in our community. So every little step we can take to educate vendors, educate business leaders, educate the community around what are healthy choices they can take on and promote in either their business or their organization or through the work they do, we'll be making some great gains.
Great. Thank you, Director Franklin.
Because if I could just say one other thing too, and that is, this is becoming a reality now in some communities, trying to ban certain things. And of course, the classic example is New York City. I don't think anybody would have dreamed that this would have been happening 5 years ago. And so likewise, we have to be very much aware of what we're doing here. Is this going to lead to more and more controls on food?
Great. Thank you, Councilor Staggers. Councilor Entenmann.
One question, Jill.
Yes.
Excuse me. He speaks from above.
Yes.
Anyway, the bottom line is that this is just an educational discussion with Ovations or anybody else that wants to participate. You're not recommending any type of controls or menus or anything. It's just an education, no different than what we try to do with the youth in our city, to be good citizens and eat healthy and all that stuff. Is that not correct?
That would be correct.
And you are not proposing to the Parks Department or to any city entity that we restrict what is sold by the vendor except through what their contract is with the city?
Correct.
As agreed to.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. Appreciate the report. Moving on, water management plan changes. Mark Cotter, Director of Public Works. Trent Lubers, Utility Operations Administrator. Greg Anderson, Water Superintendent. I can't believe you're all in ties on a day like today. Thank you so much for being here.
Tree limbs are getting in the way of my... And we're never going to do that in the long term. This is just...
Thanks, Greg. Good afternoon, City Council. Probably seems out of place today with the weather to talk about watering and water management and how we water yards, but I guess the way to look at that today is that sunnier times are coming. We've actually been contacted by some of our residents already asking about the current water restrictions in place. Can they get permits to start watering? So people are thinking about it already. So we committed to the council last year. We had a very exceptionally dry year last year. We had the Lewis and Clark supply. That came on late in the year, and we committed to council that we would bring back a water management plan that really encapsulated and incorporated that contribution that Lewis and Clark had. We wanted some time to see what Lewis and Clark would do in our system, what they could do for us, and get some certainty there. And so throughout the winter months, we spent some time working with an internal team, and we also sourced industry. We had some public meetings. We got involved with the landscaping industry. We worked some. We sourced parks and had them look at our plan that we've developed and got their input and feedback as far as how this plan would work for them. So we'll take you through what we've developed for a plan. But before we go too much further, I want to talk about where we got our water from the City of Sioux Falls before we had Lewis and Clark. Essentially, we have a surface water supply, the Big Sioux River, and we have two aquifers. One is a minor aquifer. It's called Middle Skunk Creek Aquifer. It has about 3.5 MGD stands for a million gallons a day talk to Public Works, you're going to hear all these little MGD and CFS and things like that, and I'll try to explain them as I go through, but that's million gallons a day. The Big Sioux River is about a 30 million gallon a day supply when the Big Sioux River is running, and then of course the Big Sioux Aquifer, which is 35.5 million gallons a day. And the river and the aquifer are really tied together. When the river is running, one way to think about that is when the river is running, the aquifer is full because the aquifer gets its charge from the river. So it's essentially the aquifer is full and it's running over into the Big Sioux River. So this is where we got our water historically. This is a very typical community, or a very typical story for a community like ours. Most communities, when they start up and they're small, they start with groundwater because groundwater is inexpensive to treat, and it's, in most cases, easily available, and so communities will start harvesting that groundwater. But as the communities grow and they get somewhat limited on the capacity of their aquifers, they'll start moving to surface water sources, lakes, rivers, things like that. And then the next story, or the next part of that story, is they start to import water from external sources. And so that's where Sioux Falls is at as far as moving forward. Before we talk about that a little bit, this is a graphic from the previous water management plan or lawn watering plan that we had in the city of Sioux Falls. The existing plan was not really an ordinance. There was one resolution passed that passed the odd-even, noon to 5 watering restrictions, but the other things that were incorporated into our plan were not really incorporated into our ordinance. And so every time that we wanted to make a change to go from odd-even, noon to 5 to once a week, we had to come in front of the council with a resolution. So part of the goal of this plan was to come to you with a comprehensive plan that's going to suit Sioux Falls for a long period of time and put these steps into ordinance so that we can make those changes effectively and quickly as they're necessary and as our sources dictate. So this is what our water supply looks like now. So again, you have the 3 sources, but you have Lewis and Clark added to the picture. That's a 17 million gallon a day source. Our wintertime demand alone is less than 17 million gallons a day. So when we're not watering lawns and washing cars and having that high activity, our typical daily usage right now in the wintertime for household usage for all our customers is around 17 million gallons a day. So Lewis and Clark, we essentially added what our wintertime usage is as a source to the city of Sioux Falls. So this is the graphic for our new proposed plan, and I'll take you through each step, but you're going to see this a lot. We're going to put this out with your approval of the ordinance tonight. You'll see this out on our website. If you think about a stoplight, green, yellow, red, that's kind of what we're doing here. Green is our normal operating condition. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is when we need to start looking at our available resources and managing those so that they're available for the long term. And then stage 3 is when we get to a more critical situation where there's lawn watering is not something that we would want happening in the city so that we can preserve our source for the long term. So our proposed water management plan, we saw the graphic. There's 3 stages there instead of the 4 that existed before. It's a 2-trigger system. Not only are we using our surface water supply as a trigger, but we're also using consumption. We're actually asking our customers to water and manage their water consumption responsibly. And so there's a second trigger there based on the demand in the city. And so if we manage our demand as a customer group, we'll have less impact on going from a stage 1 to a 2 or to a 3. And then the third thing that we do is we acknowledge the new supply. We really take a look at Lewis and Clark and what it means for us and what that new supply means for us. So stage 1, which is our existing condition that right out of the box, starting this year, this is where we'll be. And this is when the river is running at 50 cubic feet per second or more. And one of the things that we have in place is we have a noon to 5 watering ban, which means that if you water lawns from noon to 5, or you shouldn't be watering lawns from noon to 5 because it's really an ineffective time to water your yard. It evaporates, it's hot, it's not a good time, it's hard on the grass. And also, we're on an odd-even schedule. And what that odd-even noon to 5 does for us is it's an energy management plan for us at the facility. It helps us manage our resource and manage our day-to-day operation. If you think about letting anybody water whenever they want, so everybody comes home at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they turn on their sprinklers, and so we have 42,000 customers watering all at once. That's almost all of our 50,000 customers. And so you're running water, you're running tanks empty, and instead of managing our flow at about 45 million gallons a day and not having those big peaks, it's like stepping on the accelerator between stoplights as you're hammering the system and you're pumping out water at 60, 70, 80 million gallons a day for a short period of time. And it's not a good way to run a system. And when you do that, you turn on extra equipment. And that extra equipment, that's high horsepower equipment. That's like 1,100 horsepower pumps. And what that does is it costs us more to produce the water. And so the noon to 5, odd even essentially allows us to manage the system, manage it better, and provide less cost as far as the way we provide water. So what does stage 1 mean as far as our source goes? So these are the 4 buckets that we pull water out of. The Big Sioux Aquifer is there. We saw that on the map, and I won't read what each one of these slides mean to you, but each one of these sources are 100% available when we're at our stage 1. And if you look at the top underneath the available capacity during stage 1, if we were able to harvest all this water at once and produce it, that gives us 86 million gallons a day of water availability. So that's our stage 1 condition. Stage 2, this is when we start moving into that 2-tiered system. So at stage 2, the restrictions for lawn watering at stage 2 are again that noon to 5 watering ban, but it's that once a week watering schedule that we were at towards the end of the summer last year based on the last number address of your house. But how do we get there? We get there when the Big Sioux River is less than 50 but more than 20 cubic feet per second. So why do we have that range? Well, 50 cubic feet per second, we start to lose the ability to pull 100% of the water out of the Big Sioux River. We have to manage 100% of our capability to pull water out of the Big Sioux River. We have to manage that resource in such a way that we maintain by permit at least 20 cubic feet per second going out of the city at the Cliff Avenue gauge. And so that's why we have that range there. So we're able to, at 50 cubic feet per second, pull all the water that we can out of the Big Sioux River, but as it starts to drop below 50 cubic feet per second, we have to start throttling back what we pull from the river. And when we get down to 20 cubic feet per second, we can't pull any more water out of the river because our permit says we can't. So that's why that range is there. The second trigger is 42 million gallons per day of demand. And that's that customer interaction port that we have. And essentially what we're saying is if our customers can keep their demand below 42 million gallons a day, that we won't be here. If they go above 42 million gallons a day, then we need to move to stage 2. Last year, if we'd have had this system in place, we would not have been at odd even noon to 5. We had some other pressures on the system last year, and we never saw a peak above, what was it, Greg, about 46 million gallons a day? 46 million gallons a day was our highest peak last year. Last year, when Lewis and Clark was starting up and they had to supply other communities, we were supplying Lewis and Clark rural water system so that they could supply some of their connected customers, and we were also making water for North Lincoln rural water system. And so we lost about 8 million gallons a day of not capacity, but of peaking during those months that we had last year. So if you think about that, we never would have, losing those customers or not having those customers that we have to supply, we don't have that demand pressure anymore. So we wouldn't have been at stage 2 once a week watering restrictions last year. Now the next part of this ordinance also talks about how you move backwards from stage 2 back to stage 1. So stage 2 to stage 1, if you remember last year, we spent a lot of time jumping around 50 cubic feet per second and 20 cubic feet per second. And so we have that below 50 cubic feet per second for 10 consecutive days for us to go to one stage. But we actually go at 75 cubic feet per second for 20 consecutive days to go back from stage 2 to stage 1. The reason it's a longer period of time and it's a higher volume of water going through the river channel is we want to be certain. We don't want to confuse our customers by jumping back and forth between stage 1 and stage 2. And those river conditions, if you remember from last year, fluctuate quite rapidly depending on, you may get a rainfall that raises the river for a temporary period of time, but if it's not a meaningful rain, you're not going to stay above 50 for any length of time. So what does stage 2 mean as far as capacity? So what we're trying to show you here is the buckets are getting a little bit emptier. So the Big Sioux Aquifer was at 35.5 million gallons a day, and now you're seeing that there's only 24 million gallons a day worth of capacity there to harvest. The Big Sioux River is at that 6 to 15 million gallons a day. Lewis and Clark stays steady. That bucket's always full in there and available for us. And then again, the other groundwater supply is lower also. Stage 3. Stage 3 is in effect when we get to that 20 cubic feet per second or below, and our customer demand exceeds 34 million gallons per day. What does Stage 3 mean? Stage 3 means we're at a total water ban. And why are we at a total water ban? Because we need to start guarding and managing our groundwater resources for a long-term drought so that they're there and available for us. So the Big Sioux Aquifer is able to provide us with 16 million gallons a day, and Lewis and Clark is there for 17 million gallons a day. And then you have the 1 million gallon from Middle Scout Creek Aquifer. So what do you have there? You add those numbers up and you have 34 million gallons a day. So that's how we came up with that number for customer demand. Some other considerations for our customers is hand watering of vegetation is allowed anytime. If you want to go out and water your flower beds or water trees and shrubs, that kind of thing, you can still go out and hand water during the day and the evening when it's not your day to water. Those are things that we've always allowed and we're going to continue to allow. The other part of that is permits for newly installed lawns will be allowed. That is something that we've done in the past, and this is, from an industry standpoint, this was some of the best feedback that we got from industry. Our previous permit was about 2 weeks long. And for customers that are planting or seeding new lawns, you just get your yard germinated. What a permit allows you to do is you can water every day outside of that noon to 5. You just get your newly seeded lawn germinated, and then you have to start watering on that schedule. And if you're on a once-a-week watering schedule, it can your investment is going to be lost. And so we've worked with the industry and came up with a longer period of time to permit those new installations for yards so that they can get them established. And then once we're at that point where they're established, they'll go back to a watering schedule like everyone else, and their yards will just go dormant like everyone else's. But at least they'll have an established yard that is likely to return, and they won't lose their investment. And then the last part is something that's always been our ordinance, and that is wasting water is not allowed. So again, this is our proposed plan. If you went through the ordinance and you went through our previous plan, there was a lot of stuff in there about when car washes would be restricted from activity and you can't water or wash your car in your driveway and things like that. We've made this a lawn watering program that's really easy to follow. It's easy for our customers to participate in, and it has a lot of those restrictions taken out. There is an emergency power put into the ordinance, if you read through the ordinance in there, where if we get into a drastic situation because we have a problem with the source of supply or something like that, that we can declare an emergency for up to 30 days to severely restrict watering. But beyond that, it's a fairly simple plan. We wanted to make it easy to understand. We wanted that participation from our customers so that they actively participate in conservation. And they're there helping us manage that resource, and yet they're able to take advantage of that existing or that new supply that we added and try to maintain, for those who want to maintain their yards, they have the ability to do that. So it's a very valuable resource. We ask our customers to do what they can to help us protect that resource, and we appreciate that effort. Again, our website is up there. We'll have this presentation and our communication pieces out there, but we're available for any questions or comments that you have.
Great. Thank you, Trent. We appreciate the report. This is item 13 on tonight's agenda as a first reading. So questions from council for Trent. Yes, Councilor Karski.
One more try. Thank you, Trent. Very informational, but even more importantly, more probably well-timed. Saturday morning, we had kind of a coffee with the council, and this was a highly discussed topic on lawn watering. And the perception may be out there that under stage one, where our proposed stage one, that we have adequate water. You know, we should be able to water as much as we want, as often as we want. There's some perception out there. You've probably read it in the editorials, etc. Under stage one, the way it's being proposed, what is the anticipated usage? How many millions of gallons of water? I see that we have it for 2 and 3, but I don't see it for 1. So what's your anticipated usage per day under 1?
Well, the ability under 1 is we have 86 million gallons a day of available capacity. And if that example that I gave last year when everybody was watering hard and we were at that odd even noon to 5 schedule, we were hitting numbers like 45, 46 million gallons a day. And now we just lost those customers, about 8 million gallons a day for those customers that we were supplying for Lewis and Clark and North Lincoln County Rural Water, because they have their Lewis and Clark connection. So it would be, in my mind, based on our example last year when people were really watering intensely, at least early on, that we would be somewhere around 38 to 40 million gallons a day, and likely less than that.
Which, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's less than under stage 2. In the availability of water is considerably less under stage 2. Is an odd even really necessary under stage 1?
Well, the odd even is there from a management standpoint, and if you think about that example again, where at some point when we were making water at the plant and we were pushing water out, there was an exchange rate for several hours in the plant when people were draining the system down and we were making water, where the turnover rate was around 80 to 100 million gallons a day. And that's really difficult and hard on equipment. It's not the right way to manage the utility, and it really impacts the cost to make water, because you're turning on 3 or 4 pumps when you could do it with 2 pumps. These are 1,100 horsepower pumps. Every time you have that inrush of power, there's a charge for peaking, and then there's those pumps that go out in the system. It really puts a strain on the system. So from a management standpoint, and also to meet those needs and demands of the customer, most landscaping professionals, again, we found that out when we sourced industry, you don't need to water every day. And so from the standpoint of meeting that demand and need, if you want to water as much as you want to, every other day is certainly adequate. An inch a week is really what they recommend. And less than an inch a week, if you want it to go dormant when it's really hot, is still adequate. And so at once a week, they felt that the once a week water restriction was adequate. So it's a way for us to manage the utility and the cost of running the utility, and also protecting the infrastructure and the equipment. Because when you're pushing those large volumes of water, you also have some risk to the equipment. So it's as much a management tool as it is a tool to provide some level of guideline for our customers as far as how they water their yards.
Thank you.
Other questions from council? Councilor Staggers.
Yes. Trent, what's the maximum amount of water we can get from Lewis and Clark that we've contracted for?
Right now, we're at 17, and our ultimate capacity will be around 28 million gallons a day.
Yeah, when's the 28 million kick in?
I think timing for the true-up is still up in the air, but I think it's somewhere after 2020. Is that right? It'll be somewhere after 2020 when we do the true-up and we get our maximum capacity from them.
I guess I didn't realize it was that late. But also at the same time, I agree with you. This is all about really more management than conservation. Because in the 1990s, the administration had a philosophy that, hey, the water plant should be out there producing as much water as possible for the citizens of Sioux Falls and making money off of producing lots and lots more water. And now I know this is not our philosophy. Our philosophy is focused on trying to restrict the amount of restrict the amount of water that people are using by having all these different controls and things like that about watering and things like that. So I guess a lot of this has to do with really a different philosophy than what we used to have back in the 1990s in operating the water plant. And you also happen to mention, too, that, you know, with operating the plant at full capacity, what is the full capacity, once again, of the plant?
54, that's not right, 75 million gallons a day, is that right, Greg?
Yeah.
Yeah, Greg Anderson can answer some of these technical,
Yes.
technical questions on capacity.
Thank you. Welcome, Greg.
Good evening, Greg Anderson, Water Superintendent. Plant capacity, treatment-wise, is 75 million gallons per day. We have a pumping capacity of 105 million gallons per day with a firm capacity of about 90 million gallons per day. That's with one of our largest pumps out of service.
Yeah.
If I may, going back to the 1990s, I was around during that time when we didn't have restrictions. And the size of Sioux Falls and the size of pipelines that we have out there to provide water, the citizens could take more water than what we could pump out of the plant at certain periods of the day. We would see anywhere from 90 to 105 million gallons of water flowing through the pipes out to the city. And what happened is the reservoirs and the towers would get to dangerously low levels. So the first thing they would do is they'd have an ordinance that would say, we're going to go to noon to 5. And that would give us a breather, because we knew that when we get to noon, people would have to shut down. We could get the reservoirs full and get the towers full back for 5 o'clock, because right around 5:05, everybody went out and turned it on, and now we're back for another 8 hours of every single pump we had on, watching everything drain. So then the next step was we had to go to odd even, so that we only had to deal with 50% of our customers at any given time instead of 100. And that also had to go in front of the council by special resolution to have us do that, because even with the noon to 5, we would have trouble moving water throughout the city fast enough, because they could take it faster than what we could deliver it.
Focus was least on the citizenry. That's where the focus was at. Focus was on the customer. This is not really focused on the customer. It's just on how we're going to produce the water in the plant. And so I guess I'm concerned here about why you even have a stage 2. We have the capability of 75 million or up to 90 million. And here we're talking about 48 to 55 million. I mean, we're not even close to,
Well, when we put in stage 2, it's because we see the rivers below 50 CFS. That takes us down on the bottom half of the capacity of what we can withdraw from the river. And when the river's flowing slower, the recharge of the aquifer is slower. So we want to start getting people educated that, okay, the river's slowing up. We can still take our 17 million a day from Lewis and Clark, but we still have to manage our local water supply based on water rights and downstream users. So at 50 CFS, we're slowing down. We're trying to convince people to go to once per week, slow things down, keep the aquifer recharged, because we never know exactly how long a drought is going to last. And we know from a study that was done by the U.S. Geological Survey that once the river goes dry, you have a certain number of gallons of water you can take out of the Big Sioux Aquifer, a certain number of days, and then it's done. There's no water available on the local supply. And that was the big push back 22 years ago on why to bring in Lewis and Clark. A more sustainable, larger water supply.
Good. Thank you, Greg. Councillor Intamin.
Yeah, Greg, a question for you too then. So from a management standpoint, it's not just that you're trying to eliminate or restrict the amount of water that's going to the citizens, but we're also looking at our physical plant that we have too, the wear and tear on our equipment, the need to replace that equipment, all of those things which would ultimately reflect in our water rates, which could cause water rates to go up if that equipment has to be replaced.
Well, we plan and budget pretty extensively for the life cycle or the lifetime or the life of a pump or a motor. So they're programmed into the capital plan. So when we feel they've reached their useful life, it's programmed to be replaced. And the equipment we have is very reliable, but basically we're not trying to restrict what people want. We're trying to convince them to take it not all at once at the same time and the same day. If we can spread it out, like you hear electrical companies, spread the load. So if we can spread out the demand for water, only half the people at one time can water, we know that we can manage that very effectively. And we're not, our goal isn't so much to manage what people want. We want them to water as much as they can or as much as they desire. That's just the way it is, I guess.
And actually, it sounds like a great plan, and it's well thought out. And from seeing what we've had before, also knowing, along with that, the water that we receive and we use is the discharge water that we have to take care of through our sewer systems, storm sewer systems, and those kinds of things that we are constantly updating to. So I think you guys have done an excellent job of managing the city needs here as well as our equipment. Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple other questions from councilors, but Director Cotter, would you step up?
Just a couple of points. Mark Cotter with the Director of Public Works. Our focus is always on the customer. One of the key transitions that happened from the 90s to present day is that the federal mandates that have gone into place that really encourage water conservation. We've as a community have funded numerous conservation rebates to change out numerous toilets and high-flow washing machines that ultimately the service doesn't change, just the amount of water usually is either cut in half, in some cases cut into a fifth. If we didn't get very proactive on those conservation measures, water rates would be not competitive as they are today. And so our focus is always on the customer. You've got to have a management plan, whether you're delivering electricity or water or trying to manage wastewater. The key for our customers is they want a high-quality product at the most competitive rate, and I think Sioux Falls has done a very good job at doing both.
Great, thank you. Councillor Jameson is next.
Sure, if I could add the, I think the management program seems pretty good. The 1, 2, 3, for me, you know, I don't know if 3 is good or bad. Sometimes I get turned around, you know, if 3 is, perhaps others in the community would feel the same way, but if you had more of a normal, a limited use, and a restricted level, so that when the notice is given that the city is in a restricted water use program instead of the city is in a level 3, oh, what is level 3? Is that bad or good? Just a thought, just for guys like me. And then as far as the management program, as long as the customers are paying for what they use, that's where it's all good. I mean, after that, if we're starting to propose customers that aren't using water pay for it, then I'll call foul. But as long as the customer is using the water pays for it, I think you're on the right track there. One other thing was last year, we all probably experienced this, but my yard died a long time early into the season. And, you know, I'm out there watering it, trying to bring it back to life, going, you know, pumping thousands of, I don't know, lots of water on it. Is there any kind of education or part of this that you could really relay to all those customers? Because, I mean, it's a lot of us who are out there trying to keep our lawn alive when it's impossible and it's gone. It's gone dormant or something. Do you have any kind of education piece that you could help us with?
Well, we do have some links on our website where people can access and get that kind of information. We typically don't send anything out specifically on that particular question that I'm aware of. We haven't in the past.
Just with the, you know, I know you guys do a lot of work with the water conservation kits for schools. Just seems like a big piece of the water use that could be addressed in a better way.
I mean, like Mark said, maybe we could team up with another department such as Parks if we wanted to communicate that type of message.
Right, yeah, just something, because I found myself wondering, come on, can I do it? Can I bring it back to life if I water it enough? And my neighbors were telling me, what are you doing? It's dead. And I'm like, oh. So my neighbors were a big help to me, and then I passed it on to others as well once I became informed, but I just felt like I saw others doing it, and if we could save a lot of water, probably doing that. That's all.
Just a reminder, an inch a week is sufficient according to all the experts in that area, and to call your local lawn care center or your sprinkler guy or whatever, an inch a week is all you need, and they do go dormant. They don't die. The grass goes dormant. It's all turning green. It was until it got iced on, but remember that, an inch a week. Okay, further questions from council. Councillor Staggers.
Yeah, my understanding is it's been a long time since we've had an inspection of the equipment at the water plant, and that we're going to be having an inspection coming up pretty soon so that we can maintain our insurance on that equipment. I guess my question is, why has it been so long since we've had an inspection of the equipment?
Well, we had the DENR, South Dakota Department of Environmental and Natural Resources, here in January or February of this year, and they do a sanitary survey every 3 years that they bring in their experts and they look at our facility, evaluate the condition of the plant, the pumps, the piping, the source water, the chemicals. They evaluate everything, every aspect of the treatment plant. and they just passed us with flying colors in February of this year.
But my understanding is we are going to be having another inspection coming up by private inspectors to make sure that we can keep our insurance. Is that correct?
Well, if it is, I'm not aware of it.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Does that have something to relate with the fire department? And can we get the nature of what that question was, or where that information came from?
My understanding was it was the water plant. And so I will be double checking about that.
Okay. And normally, as the ISO rating is identified for a community, they work with fire, and not only on the proximity and the call time that it takes. That's why there's multiple fire stations. And one of those is also what is the infrastructure built out in the city, locations of hydrants and things of that nature. But I can assure you that the water plant, it's got its own dedicated maintenance team that has work orders, and they have proactive maintenance on all their systems, not only in the plant but in the well field. And so at any given time, those systems are ready to perform.
I'll double check on that.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Any questions from other councilors? All right, thank you all for your report. We appreciate it. Remember, it is green for 1, yellow for 2, and 3 is red for stop. So it's item 13 tonight. Any other business before the council? A couple of housekeeping things from the chair. I did say that if citizens wanted to testify tonight and were unable to be here, that they could contact us to defer items. I have had one citizen ask for that. We will be deferring item 16 tonight at the request of a citizen who is unable to be here tonight. So I would say that to any other citizens, if you want to email m.erpenbach@siouxfalls.org, we will defer those items. We are meeting at 7 o'clock because we do have contracts and several items that are of critical Sioux Falls business that need to be done tonight. So with that, I will adjourn this meeting and see you at 7.